I think I can hear Adrian.
G'day, guys. How are you? I've got my camera off. I'm in a restaurant in Eurasia somewhere.
A while back, Jess was on talking about the DNA that apparently might have been discovered in the COVID jibby jabs. In Australia now, from what I understand, Adrian, there were some inquiries being done or some discoveries as to the levels of DNA exceeding certain government limits, but then the government comes out and says misinformation, disinformation, move along, nothing to see here?
That's pretty much exactly it. The DNA vials were shipped by a chain of command through to laboratories in Canada. Actually, some Canadian vials, US vials, and Australian vials all managed to find their way into Dr. David Speaker's labs in Canada. And David was used a different testing method than has been traditionally used, certainly in the Australian Therapeutic Goods Administration. And our government's drug administrators, our equivalent of your FDA. He used a method that is probably far more appropriate to identify the DNA contamination in these shots. And when he found this, he had his work replicated and backed up by a number of scientists all around the world, actually. And one of our members of parliament in Canberra sent a letter to the Prime Minister. So he wrote a letter basically asking for these jabs to be suspended until we could confirm or deny whether or not these new contamination findings were real or not. Like the contamination findings they discovered were up to 145 times over the Australian legal limit of DNA contamination. One of our members of parliament had a letter signed initially by 26 co-signatories of some of the great scientists, doctors, virologists, immunologists from all around the world, including some human rights lawyers and attorneys from all over the world. He didn't get a response from our Prime Minister, and so he wrote a second letter, which was signed by another 26, ended up being 52 scientific experts from around the world, including Jessica, who's on the call with us. So thank you, Jessica, for being a part of this. After not hearing anything back again from the Prime Minister, ignored his letters once again. We had some people actually on our council that had been vaccine injured. We put a motion to our local government to debate Friday sort of 10 days ago. Our motion was to basically write a letter to the Prime Minister asking, well, firstly, why hasn't he responded to our Member of Parliament asking for the suspension of these vaccines? But we also put some things in there to make sure that we notified every council, every city council, every city shire across the entire nation of Australia to make sure they were given the same information that we were given, and then have also notified the health ministers of all the states, notify the federal health minister, the Secretary of Health in Canberra, and also notifying our local healthcare providers that actually were administering these shots in pharmacies and in the hospitals and medical clinics. We got our motions passed by the local council with a vote of 5-2. We're in the process of sending out literally thousands of letters across Australia to all local government administrations across the country. It's going to be very hard for the Prime Minister and certainly the health ministers of the various states to continue to ignore this science, because one thing we put in our motion was we didn't allow them just to tell us that it's safe and effective, and the FDA and Canada's health regulators and Australia's health regulators have tested it and they know it's safe, because we actually got through a Freedom of Information request. We actually got some information from the Australian government to find that they were using the quantitative PCR test to measure the contamination levels of the Moderna and the Pfizer. Moderna holds the world patent for removing DNA fragments from mRNA solutions. And in Moderna's own patent, it says you cannot use qPCR to identify or calculate or quantify the volume of DNA fragments in these vials. And that's what our Australian government has been using. And that's what our Australian government has been gaslighting every senator and member of parliament that have asked questions for the last 4 years about the efficacy and safety of these jabs. So we've kind of caught them out now. We found that they are using outdated and irrelevant methods to do the testing. Look, the Australian government right now is on the ropes for sure, and they're using smearing and the usual ad hominem and all sorts of things to try and worm their way out of giving us an answer. But of course, as our letters go out across the country in the coming week, I think we'll see major turnaround and some major things happening within Australian political circles.
Are any country on earth now that acknowledges formally the high levels of DNA contaminants in the shots?
That's a really great question. I'm not sure. Jess is probably better positioned to answer that. So certainly in Australia, we're the first level of government, even though we're only local government. We've obviously got 3 levels of government in Australia: local, state, and federal. We're the first level of government in Australia that is brought forward in a majority vote to challenge this whole paradigm of safe and effective. And certainly we're asking the question of our federal government and of our state governments and all the health ministers across the country to please explain. And you cannot use the old, outdated science that you have been using for the past 4 years to gaslight doctors, to gaslight anyone that asks these questions, because we now have the science, which has been replicated all over the world now, to take away their ability basically to lie to us and tell us that, oh, no, we know it's safe, we've already done the testing, we know the testing doesn't work, we know the testing is irrelevant. You know, like I said in our debate, either you're incompetent or you're lying, and either one is not a good outcome for you. So you need to come through with the truth and tell us exactly what the fuck is going on here. I'd hate to be an Australian health minister or someone that's in the Australian Therapeutic Goods Administration at the moment, because they certainly they've never been put in the sort of position that they've been put in the last week.
Okay, amazing. Adrian, where can people follow you? Jess and I are going to talk about this and flesh out the details. Where can people follow you for progress as this advances in Australia?
Look, I appreciate that, but I kind of, as Jess knows, I kind of operate in the shadows a little bit. I'm not big on the social media. I don't do many of these things. I'm sort of, probably. I mean, me personally, I have a council page. It's just on Facebook. Again, it's not something that I really ever promoted. I think it's Adrian McRae for Port Hedland Council, something like that on Facebook. But yeah, look, I sort of I've never been a big social media user, to be honest. So I'm not really one to promote myself. But look, there are websites going out. Australians Demand Answers. .com.au is the website we're using to direct all traffic around Australia to for councillors and members of government, members of local government, members of state government, members of federal government, to go there and find all the information, including the reports that Jessica and other wonderful scientists and humanitarian legal minds around the world have signed on to. So yeah, probably the best place would be to AustraliansDemandAnswers.com.au.
Amazing. Adrian, thank you very much.
Look, thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank you for supporting what we're doing down here, and it's certainly the world is watching, and it means a lot to us that we've had a lot of support. Thank you, Jess, for sharing. We're up to somewhere between 30 and 40 million views on what we're doing in the last week. So, I think the biggest ever council viewing in Port Hedland. Before that was in the hundreds, not even in the thousands. So to go from something like 500 was the most ever views to tens of millions is it's really it shows where the psyche of the world is at right now, and we're certainly we're humbled to have all the support. It's coming in from all over the world. So thank you you guys for giving me the opportunity to talk to you, and I'm sorry that I couldn't talk in a more visual and a more relaxed setting than where I am.